On a suffocating August night in 1851, a single line was written into a slave trader's ledger in Southside Virginia. No name, no history, just a price nearly 4 times higher than any human being should have commanded. 14 months later, 3 people were dead. A 30,000-acre plantation was abandoned. Entire records were erased, and one room was ordered sealed forever. What happened inside Belmont Estate was not a ghost story. There were no curses, no demons, only an obsession so quiet, so rationalized, that it destroyed everyone who touched it. Tonight, we are reopening a story Virginia tried to forget, and once you understand what was purchased that night, you'll understand why some truths were never meant to survive the record. Before we move deeper into the story of Belmont Estate and the purchase that sealed the Ruttles family's fate, if you are drawn to the erased chapters of American history, the ones deliberately buried, make sure you are subscribed to Nyctis Chronicles, and let me know where you are listening from. Now, let us step inside Belmont Estate and uncover why 3 lives would be destroyed to keep a secret hidden. The truth of that autumn is far more disturbing than any ghost story ever told. Southside Virginia in 1851 was a world closed in on itself. Vast plantations lay scattered among dense forests of oak and pine, joined by dirt roads that dissolved into red mire with every rainfall. Tobacco ruled the land, and wealth was measured in acreage and human lives. The air hung thick with humidity and the bitter scent of curing leaves, a smell that clung to clothes and skin alike. Belmont Estate rested along the eastern edge of Prince Edward County, 30,000 acres held by the Ruttles family since 1783. The main house was Georgian in style, red brick framed by white columns, dignified rather than extravagant, reflecting a family proud of age and lineage. 42 enslaved people labored there, living in a line of cabins behind the house, a parallel village built from necessity and neglect. Thomas Rutledge was 37 that summer, tall and composed, bearing the refined features shaped by generations of Virginia's planter elite. He had inherited Belmont 7 years earlier, along with crushing debts he worked tirelessly to repay. Neighbors described him as stern but not unusually cruel, a man who ran his property with cold efficiency rather than overt malice. His wife, Catherine, was 10 years younger, the daughter of a Richmond merchant whose shipping fortune had provided her dowry. They married in 1847, and her money had stabilized Belmont's finances. Catherine was widely admired for her beauty. Pale, slender, dark-haired, her appearance carefully cultivated to suit Virginia society. Yet there was something brittle about her, an air of fragility that suggested she might fracture under pressure. The stillbirth of their son in 1849 had hollowed her in ways few noticed and fewer understood. She withdrew into long afternoons upstairs, reading novels, staring through windows toward fields that seemed impossibly distant. The Ruttles household followed the rhythms expected of their class. Church on Sundays, dinners with neighboring planters, Thomas serving as magistrate and board member, Catherine organizing charities and managing household servants. From the outside, Belmont appeared orderly, prosperous, unremarkable. But beneath the surface, both husband and wife were profoundly unhappy. Thomas carried a nameless emptiness no achievement could fill. Catherine felt herself fading, unseen even within her own home. They lived side by side, barely touching, sharing space without intimacy. Into this quiet desolation arrived Samuel Wickham on the morning of August 14th, 1851. Wickham was a familiar figure in Southside Virginia, thin and sharp-eyed, dressed always in a black suit worn thin by travel. He specialized in what he called specialty acquisitions, enslaved people with rare skills or unusual traits that commanded high prices. He had spent months moving between coastal markets, searching for inventory to tempt wealthy buyers. Thomas received him in the Plantation office, a separate building where business was conducted away from domestic life. Wickham accepted whiskey, spoke of tobacco prices and politics, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've acquired something unusual, Mr. Rutledge, something suited to a man of discernment." Thomas replied coolly that he needed no additional field hands. Wickham smiled. "This isn't a field hand." From his coat, he produced a folded bill of sale, dense with notes. The enslaved person had been purchased in Charleston, previously owned by a physician in New Orleans. Educated, literate. But that was not the true distinction. "This slave," Wickham said carefully, "is what medical men term a hermaphrodite, born with the physical characteristics of both sexes, a genuine rarity." The physician had documented the condition thoroughly. The enslaved person was young, healthy, and trained since childhood to submit to examination without resistance. Something shifted inside Thomas Rutledge. The idea lodged itself in his mind with unsettling force. Neither one thing nor another, an ambiguity that defied order. He thought of Catherine upstairs, staring into emptiness. He thought of his own gnawing dissatisfaction. "I'll need to see the slave," he said. 20 minutes later, Thomas stood facing Jordan for the first time. The enslaved person waited in the doorway, hands folded, eyes lowered in learned submission. Jordan wore a plain cotton shift, yet even at a distance the ambiguity was unmistakable. The face was striking, neither fully masculine nor feminine. High cheekbones, full lips, dark eyes framed by long lashes. The body suggested curves without clarity, and when ordered to speak, the voice emerged from a register belonging to no single category. "My name is Jordan, Master. I am 19 years old. I can read, write, and cipher. I submit to medical examination without resistance." The words were rehearsed, drained of inflection, but beneath them lay awareness, an intelligence that understood exactly what was being sold. Thomas felt fascination bloom into something darker. "I'll take it," he said. The sale was completed within the hour. Wickham departed satisfied. Thomas remained alone with Jordan, excitement and unease twisting together. He led the enslaved person not to the quarters, but to a small cottage near the formal gardens, once used by his father's valet, isolated, yet close. "You'll stay here," Thomas said. "I'll decide your duties later." That evening, Thomas told Catherine of the purchase, describing Jordan as an educated house slave with unusual medical history. Catherine listened without interest until his tone shifted. The next morning, she accompanied him to the cottage. Her indifference slowly transformed into something else as she took in Jordan's presence. When Thomas explained the condition in clinical terms, Catherine's expression mirrored his own earlier reaction, curiosity tinged with disturbance. She asked to examine Jordan herself. What followed marked the beginning of their descent. The examination moved from medical interest into territory neither could name. When they left, they did not speak of it. But that night, after months of distance, Thomas and Catherine came together in their marriage bed, bound not by love, but by a shared secret. Autumn settled over Prince Edward County, but inside Belmont Estate, something malignant began to grow. Jordan was moved into the main house, assigned as Catherine's personal maid, given better food, finer clothing, and isolated entirely from the other enslaved people. They noticed immediately. They saw the master and mistress vanish upstairs at strange hours. They heard sounds through walls they could not interpret. They saw Jordan emerge pale and distant, moving carefully, eyes hollow. Harriet, the cook, sensed danger first. She had survived decades at Belmont by observing what others missed. She noticed Thomas neglecting his duties, Catherine wasting away. One morning she tried to speak to Jordan alone. "Are they hurting you?" she asked softly. "I have everything I need," Jordan replied. "It's easier when you don't think." That night, whispers began in the quarters. Stories of conjure, of unnatural power. But upstairs, Thomas and Catherine were already lost, consumed by an obsession neither could stop, one that would soon demand everything they had left. As September bled into October, the plantation settled into a rhythm that, from a distance, still resembled order. Tobacco was harvested. Meals were prepared. Bells rang at the proper hours. But inside Belmont Estate, decay had begun its quiet work. Thomas managed the property only when forced by habit or necessity. Bills accumulated on his desk, unopened. Meetings were forgotten. Catherine withdrew almost entirely, spending her days locked away on the third floor with Jordan. The enslaved community watched and understood more than anyone credited them for. They saw Jordan's strange elevation and deeper isolation, the way privilege functioned here not as comfort, but as confinement. They noticed how Jordan moved through the house like a shadow, never lingering, never resting. How the slave's eyes seemed always fixed on some distant point beyond the walls. Harriet noticed everything. She saw Catherine's hands tremble when she ate. She saw Thomas pacing at night, restless and hollow-eyed. She saw Jordan emerge from the upstairs room with careful steps, body held as if pain were something to be managed rather than escaped. One morning, Harriet tried again. "Child," she whispered, "whatever's happening up there, it ain't right." Jordan's expression flickered for just an instant. Then the mask returned. "I do what I was born to do," the slave said softly. "What I was trained for." The whispers grew louder after that. Stories passed between cabins in the evenings, carried on breath and fear. Some spoke of hoodoo, of people born between worlds who could unmake those who tried to claim them. Others rejected such talk, but no one could explain the changes in the big house. Upstairs, Thomas immersed himself in medical texts, volumes on anatomy and rare conditions. He read late into the night, comparing diagrams to the living person he summoned upstairs. He began a private journal, hidden and locked away, filled with notes and sketches he would later burn. Catherine's fixation took a different shape. She dressed Jordan in garments she commissioned herself, some emphasizing softness, others severity, testing how identity shifted with cloth and cut. "I want to understand you," she said one afternoon, adjusting a collar with shaking hands. "Does it matter, mistress?" Jordan replied. "I am what you see." "What do you see?" Catherine asked. Jordan paused. Something to be examined, something to explain. The words struck harder than accusation. Catherine said nothing. By late October, the signs of collapse were unmistakable. Thomas had grown gaunt, his eyes fever-bright. Catherine abandoned society entirely, refusing visitors, declining church. Jordan remained unchanged on the surface, obedient and composed, existing in that narrow space between person and possession. Then came the attempted escape. Two brothers, Samuel and Isaac, ran under cover of night. They were caught miles away and dragged back in chains. Thomas ordered punishment as required, 10 lashes each, performed before the assembled enslaved people. But his attention drifted even as the whip fell. Harriet watched from the kitchen window and understood. The master was already gone, disappearing into something that no longer included them. That night, raised voices echoed from the third floor. Anger, fear, something breaking. The next morning, Jordan moved even more carefully than before. When Harriet met the slave's eyes, she saw resignation there. Not fear, knowledge. November arrived with cold winds and neglect. Fields went untended. Fences broke and stayed broken. Tobacco rotted unsold in barns. Neighbors noticed Thomas's absence, Catherine's disappearance. Rumors circulated: financial trouble, illness, drink. None guessed the truth, because the truth had no place in their understanding of the world. The enslaved people felt it most acutely. Without oversight, the plantation ran on momentum alone. They maintained routines because survival demanded it, and Jordan remained apart from all of them, a living boundary marker between worlds. Some tried to reach out. Delia whispered offers of companionship. Jordan thanked her and declined. "I am alone," the slave said. "We all are in the end." By late November, Thomas withdrew even from Jordan, retreating into his study with whiskey and silence. Catherine filled the void, spending entire days upstairs, talking until her voice failed. She spoke of Richmond, of her marriage, of the child she lost, of feeling fundamentally wrong. Jordan listened without judgment. Sometimes Catherine slept in the chair, and Jordan covered her with a blanket and waited. "Why do you stay?" Catherine asked once. "And go where?" Jordan replied. "Everywhere I am examined." In December, Thomas invited Dr. Edmund Carril to Belmont. He framed it as professional curiosity, a desire for medical validation. Carril arrived from Richmond, confident and courteous, but troubled by what he sensed almost immediately. The examination he conducted was respectful, clinical, restrained. It stood in stark contrast to what had been happening in that room for months. When finished, Carril asked to speak privately. "What concerns me," he said carefully, "is not the slave's condition. It is you." He spoke of obsession, of deterioration, of lines crossed. Thomas bristled, defended himself, claimed property rights. Carril warned him plainly, whatever this was, it would destroy them all. Thomas did not listen. After Carril left, something hardened in the house. The warning had not sobered them, it had cornered them. January brought heavy snow and isolation. With no visitors, no obligations, whatever restraint remained dissolved. Catherine barely left the third floor. Thomas stopped pretending entirely. Jordan endured, but Jordan also began to speak differently. Quiet observations slipped through the mask. "You are hurting each other now," the slave said one night. "Not just me." Thomas recoiled. Rage flared, but beneath it was fear. When he raised his hand, it fell uselessly. Power had already slipped away. February brought thaw without relief. More escapes were attempted. Harriet refused to bring food upstairs. Catherine wasted away, skeletal and unmoored. Thomas wandered the house like a ghost. The servants whispered not of rumors now, but certainty. Something terrible was coming. Harriet confronted Thomas at last. She spoke plainly, risking everything. "Sell that child," she said. "Send Jordan away before this house collapses." For a moment, Thomas looked like a man drowning who saw the shore. Then the moment passed. "Get out," he whispered. February 14th arrived under cold rain and howling wind. Catherine moved with strange calm that morning, deliberate and distant. By evening, the house groaned under the storm. Thomas drank in his study. Upstairs, Catherine watched Jordan with a desperation sharpened to clarity. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "There's no starting over." Jordan sensed it then. The stillness, the resolve. Catherine moved to the dresser and retrieved a pistol, dull metal catching lamplight. The storm broke overhead. The door burst open. Thomas stood there, rain-soaked, eyes suddenly clear. And in that small room, under flickering light and thunder, the obsession reached its final, irreversible edge. Thomas stepped forward, his voice trembling with a gentleness that felt newly discovered, as though it had been buried beneath months of fixation and now surfaced too late. "Catherine, please," he said. "Whatever you're thinking, give me the gun." She looked at him with a clarity that frightened him more than hysteria ever could. Her face, hollowed by weeks of sleeplessness and hunger, seemed almost peaceful now. "There's nothing left to fix," she said quietly. "We broke it. All of it. We took a person and made them a mirror for everything we hated in ourselves." Jordan spoke then, abandoning the rehearsed neutrality for the first time. "Catherine," the slave said, using her name, "you can still walk away. Both of you can." "It's too late," she replied. "It's been too late for a long time." The shaking in her hands stopped. The pistol rose, not toward Jordan, but toward herself. Thomas lunged, desperate, but grief and exhaustion made him slow. The gunshot shattered the room, compressing sound and light into a single violent instant. Catherine fell backward, her body striking the floor with a finality that could not be undone. Blood spread across the boards, dark and gleaming. Thomas collapsed beside her, sounds tearing from him that barely resembled language. He hovered over her body, hands trembling, afraid to touch, as though touch itself had become destructive. Jordan stood by the window, unmoving, face unreadable. Outside, rain lashed the glass and thunder rolled, indifferent to the life ending inside. The servants heard the shot. Harriet froze in the kitchen, dread crystallizing into certainty. Delia covered her mouth to keep from screaming, the house filled with whispered panic. Catherine did not die immediately. The bullet had done terrible damage but left her suspended between worlds, unconscious, beyond pain. She was carried to her bed. Thomas sat beside her through the night, clutching her hand, whispering apologies she could no longer hear. Jordan brought water, cloths, performed the necessary tasks with practiced calm. The doctor arrived near midnight, examined Catherine, and shook his head. There was nothing to be done. When Thomas asked if she suffered, the doctor said no. She was already gone in all but breath. Thomas sent him away. He spoke to Catherine through the long hours, confessions spilling out unchecked. He told her of his emptiness, his terror of seeing himself clearly. He begged forgiveness for bringing Jordan into their lives, for everything he had ruined. As dawn crept in, gray and cold, Catherine's breathing changed. One final ragged sound escaped her, and then there was nothing. Her hand went limp in his. Thomas remained beside her long after the warmth left her skin. When Jordan finally spoke, reminding him that others must be told, Thomas turned, eyes raw and hollow. "This is your fault," he said flatly. "You destroyed us." Jordan met his gaze without flinching. "No, master," the slave replied. "You did this to yourselves. I was only here." Thomas said nothing more. The aftermath unfolded with grim predictability. Thomas claimed Catherine's death was an accident, a mishandling of an old pistol. The magistrate, a longtime acquaintance, accepted the explanation with relief. An accident was easier. The investigation was brief. Questions went unasked. Catherine's funeral was held 3 days later. Neighbors gathered in the cold rain, murmuring sympathy. They spoke of tragedy, of a young woman taken too soon. They remarked on Thomas's hollow appearance, how grief had aged him. None spoke of rumors. Some truths were inconvenient in Virginia in 1852. Within the enslaved community, the truth spread anyway, carried quietly from mouth to mouth. The story grew, acquiring the shape of legend. Some said Jordan had bewitched the Rutleds. Others said beauty and sin had undone them. Still others understood something closer to the truth, that the Rutleds had looked too closely at themselves and could not endure what they saw. Within a week, Thomas arranged to sell Belmont Estate. He accepted far less than it was worth. Before the sale, he sealed the third-floor room where Catherine had died, ordered the furniture removed, the floor scrubbed. The stains never fully disappeared. The door was locked, the key thrown into the well, the condition written into the contract. He destroyed every document connected to Jordan. Bills of sale, medical notes, journals, letters. He burned Catherine's diary unread. He sold most of the enslaved people, scattering families across the county. He kept Jordan. Why, he never explained. Thomas moved to a small house in Lynchburg with only 3 enslaved people, Jordan and 2 elderly servants. There was no obsession now, only silence. They lived like ghosts under the same roof, bound by memory neither could escape. Sometimes Thomas stood outside Jordan's door at night, hand raised, seeking absolution or understanding. He never knocked. Jordan heard him and did nothing. Thomas Ruttle died in his sleep on November 3, 1852. The physician found no cause. His heart had simply stopped. A broken spirit, the report noted. Jordan was sold at auction with the remaining assets. The price was low. Rumors had followed. The buyer was a farmer who dismissed superstition. After that, the record goes silent. Jordan vanished into the vast darkness of the slave system, another life unrecorded. Whether freedom ever came is unknown. The silence may be the only answer history offers. Belmont Estate stood empty for years. New owners came and left quickly. The sealed room disturbed anyone who passed. Cold lingered there, even in summer. When it was finally opened, stains remained despite new boards and paint. The house never felt right again. By 1865, during the chaos of war, the main house burned under unexplained circumstances. Some blamed soldiers. Others whispered it destroyed itself. Only foundations remained, slowly reclaimed by forest. Today, nothing remains but crumbling brick beneath leaves and shadow. County records say little. The Rutland incident is absent, erased. But stories endure, of obsession, of power, of a person reduced to an object who survived while those who tried to possess them did not.